Dr. Troy Hall, how are you doing today? This is Dr. Keith McNally, and you are on the Question Guy podcast, and I appreciate your time so much. And there are so many things I want to ask you, just like with any guest. But we're here to talk about, at least I would like to talk about this book. And so I'm going to show it up to the camera. And the book is called Cohesion Culture, authored by you. And I believe it's been out for 2.5, maybe 3 years now. It's rather recent book.
It has, yes.
So this is all of your work in very succinct, concrete, and believe me, it's almost textbook like. So I could tell that you're a doctor. You've got this very textbook like structure, and probably if I would have written a book, very much the same way. So the big letters and then the key concepts. And so you really go into depth about three things that I would like to talk about, and I've been talking too much already. So I want to show the cover to the audience, and then of course those who are just listening. It's Cohesion Culture, and then it's got a blue background, and there are paper airplanes here. And so each of these three things we're going to talk about. So let's go ahead and dive in. You are the master of what you call cohesion culture. So let's talk about that. What is, in your perspective, what is cohesion, and why is it important to the workplace?
Well, cohesion is a causal phenomenon, and that's what the research has told us, meaning that when cohesion is present within an organization, then you automatically get performance, and the level of performance you get is engagement. And that's what we are looking for in our organizations. We're looking for these employees who will be engaged. So how we infuse the cohesion into our culture makes a difference. Cohesion has three primary elements that are under my research. They're belonging, value, and shared mutual commitment. When those three strategic elements are present, then you have cohesion. So when I talk to organizational leaders and I coach, whether it's an executive or we're working toward performance of an individual at a variety of levels within an organization, we're really focusing on infusing this cohesion into their culture. So you can have a culture of joy, of innovation, of excellence, of service, of sales, whatever culture you want. But the infusion of cohesion into the culture then sort of creates that little bit of a trademarked program that I've created called Cohesion Culture. So cohesion is, in this study, the elements of belonging, value, and shared mutual commitment.
So how do you get there? And so that seems like a lot, because at the heart of everything, we're all human beings. And I have this habit, and I'm just going to take a tangent and come back, and this may hopefully be pertinent to our conversation. I read a lot of like memes, and YouTube has all these different channels that just have these funny quotes that are pulled from Instagram or Twitter, right? And sometimes they have a list of all the stuff, and I'll just use the word stuff, that goes on in the workplace, and just how horrible it can possibly be, and things that just wouldn't make sense at all, and yet we have to endure, just endure it. We go to work and we have to trudge through 40 hours of work in a place that we may or may not like, with people that we may or may not like. And one of the memes I always, that comes back to me is the lunch break. Everybody gets a lunch break, right? And so I'm going to butcher this, but I'm going to try real hard to get it right. And so the guy's, eating his sandwich, and his coworker, whoever that is, comes in and starts talking to him. And whatever it was that he said, he just felt interrupted because somebody's talking to him while he's eating lunch. And I thought to myself, you and there are others that I talk to who really talk about culture as that empowerment piece. But are we really, is it really happening? Is it really alive and well in most of our workplaces? And I've never saw it. Not the belonging. I don't feel belonged. I don't feel like I belong to my current company. Valued, maybe. and then shared commitment. Wow, that's a lot to ask. So
Let's break that down a little bit so
please,
that we can
yeah.
get a better understanding. So is it possible to achieve it? Yes.
Okay.
So there are organizations that will achieve it. And it's unfortunate that you may not have been part of an organization that embodied this and allowed this to happen. Let's keep in mind a couple of things. So since you referenced the book, we'll just remind those who are listening today that the book is written into three specific sections. The first section deals with the leadership, because if the leadership's not right, doesn't matter what happens after that. The next section is on how you build the culture, and the third section is bring it to life. So now that you have some basis for that, we're going to build everything around the concept of leadership. We're going to
Okay.
build it around the concept of transformative leader, which says that I will think of others first before self. So it's not a martyr system, it's actually a focus system. So the individual leader focuses on others first and then self. That's a layer.
Okay.
Now, when you have that layer, so you've got that leader operating in that way, you say, well, what are some of the principles that this leader has to have? And I call that the leadership vest. They have
A
to have
vest.
vision, the
Okay.
vest,
Okay.
VEST,
So there's an
vest.
acronym here.
Yes. So they have vision and teach it. They have an emotional intelligence and understand what it is and how to use it. They have good social connectivity with people, meaning they know how to get along, and they create a trusted environment. That's the leadership vest. So you first start with the mindset, that concept A, I'm going to focus on others first and then self.
Mhm.
And then you're going to lay these four principles over top of it. I'm going to know that I have vision and I know that I'm responsible for teaching it. I know I have emotional intelligence. I manage my emotions, the emotions of others. I have good social connectivity, meaning I know how to interact with people. I'm not a jerk. I don't wake up in the morning trying to make people's lives miserable. I really know how to connect with them. And then I create a trusted environment. I'm considerate. I'm consistent in my communication. I'm candid in my information to them. And now we're going to lay one more thing on top of that. We're going to layer these 7 attributes of an effective leader that's on page 20 in the book. And that is, am I teachable? Am I compassionate? Do I extend grace? Do I seek the truth? Am I humble? Am I authentic and or pure of heart? And lastly, do I seek peace? Do I make peace?
Wow.
So now you've got the idea of the leadership as a foundation. And then now you can bring about belonging. And what belonging requires is for you to feel a sense of, I am a part of this. And to really truly feel a part of it, you have to be included. If not, you're just fitting in. And therefore, you can synthetically get along. There are individuals in an organization that think they belong, but they synthetically fit in. They belong, they actually move to that element of belonging when their psychological needs are handled and they no longer have any fear or intrepidation about their job, or they're not concerned whether they're going to stay employed. They're able to self-actualize and they move to that space or that phase of belonging where they feel this is special for me. And they begin to give a piece of their identity into the group and create that group mentality, which then says, I am now a part of this and I belong. And the easiest way for people to think about this is in this fashion. If I were having a party and I sent you an invitation, the likelihood is you might feel like you belong. You might say, wow, he thought of me. He considered me to be a part of this party. And when you get there, I show you where the food is. I walk around with you and I show you and introduce you to some people. I even let you know where the bathroom is.
Cool.
And then music is playing. I invite you to come to the dance floor. Now you're included. Now you've reached the level of belonging that is no longer just fitting in, but you're now feeling and you're sensing that you're a part of it. And those actions that I just described is what the leader has to do to create that sense of belonging within an organization. So imagine when you come into the company, no one ever asks you your opinion. You never get to contribute in a way. You don't get extra assignments. You don't, well, you might get extra assignments, but that's because maybe somebody doesn't want to do it. But from that real authentic place, do I get a chance to really put my mark on my space? Do I get a chance to really give ideas? Can I improve the quality and the working relationships within the organizations? And when I do, I can feel included. Does the senior leadership greet me in a way that makes me feel like I am a person as opposed to an object? So all of a sudden now, those are just some of the simple actions that can actually happen to really bring forth that sense of belonging. Now in value, when you mentioned it, you kind of thought about being valued. Aha, we now need to change that a little bit. For cohesion, the value is when you recognize that your job is meaningful. It has purpose. I know what I'm doing. I understand what happens upstream. I know what happens when I handle it. And then I understand when it goes downstream where it does. I have value, and I've extended the value beyond my own silo to the enterprise. So now value is much more rich than just how I'm treated. Now, it's important, as I mentioned with belonging, you have respect, you've got trust, you've got that social connectivity, emotional connection, the vision, all that stuff is happening. But the value aspect is not just how I feel I'm treated, but it's how I'm connected to the organization in the role that I play. So now I have a great combination between my role and my identity within value.
Mhm.
And then with shared mutual commitment, the opportunity is where you really kick in, is where I care about you before self, which means that when you first start in the organization, I make sure you know where your future is each and every day. I know what's available to you to grow, to develop, and advance because I am spending time making sure that you see the vision of where you can be in the organization, which says that, oh, this job is meaningful because I can now build upon that. I have growth and development opportunities. That is what needs to happen. Then, once that occurs, I am now more likely to participate in the desired outcomes of the organization because I have fulfilled the three requirements of belonging, value, and shared mutual commitments.
When you say all these things, it seems like the optimal place to work. And I almost wanted to say, I actually just want to, I want to live there now. I want to belong there. Because you want to experience that. You want to feel that. You want to know that just as on a human level, as a person,
Yes.
you want to experience the respect. But my fears, the things that I'm thinking about when I hear you say these things is that that's a lot of work on one person, and we'll call that person whoever that leader is in the organization. If you're saying there's one thing, and then they've got to wear this vest, and then you've got to pile on 7 other attributes to that person, it's almost like they have to practice being a leader before they can literally do anything else.
Well,
Am
it's a
I
work in
missing? Did I
prog.
miss? It's a
It's
work in progress.
it's a work in progress. And think about it this way: Did you
That's a
learn to
lot.
ride? Did you learn to ride a bike when you first came out of the womb?
No.
Okay, great. What did you learn to do first?
Well, actually, I was just reading a Google post on that, and nobody remembers. The brain doesn't remember that far back. But
Yeah,
I'm assuming we had to eat first.
yeah. So you basically figured out how to maybe sit up, right? So you had to figure out some sort of sense of balance before you could even move into the area of now I'm scooting across the floor to I'm now actually standing up. Oh, I'm now standing up and scooting. I'm now scooting and then standing up. I'm now standing up and taking a step. I'm taking some steps. I'm now walking. I practice walking, and we do that for about 4 or 5 years before we actually get into a real bike where we've got just two wheels and we have to focus on the balance. So
Right.
here's the deal. It took 5 years for you to figure out how to ride a bike, but once you learned how to ride the bike, do you ever have to think about how to ride the bike again? So let's think about leadership development. We should be spending the time, effort, and energy to do those things. And when I say it all at one time, it does seem like it's a lot. but you do it one step at a time. And
Okay.
organizations, when they effectively do this, will create training programs that will build them one step at a time. And that's one of the things that I've done. I've built education programs around what leaders can do to make this happen. The other thing that's also important that we've kind of left out a little bit is I ask people to subscribe to the philosophy that everyone is a leader. So whether you have responsibilities of people reporting to you or not is not the only definition of a leader. If you answer questions, you help move projects along further, you've got some level of accountability or responsibility, you are in fact a leader.
Okay.
So all of a sudden it becomes everyone's responsibility. So imagine what it would look like in an organization if you went beyond Gru and the minions to where you actually had individuals all participating by saying, I'm going to think of the person next to me before I think of myself. I'm going to think of the leader before I think of myself. And the person next says, I'm going to think of the person next to me before myself. I'm going to think of the leader before that. And the leader says, I'm going to think of those other people before I think of myself. And if you get that kind of activity, that sort of synergism going, then you're getting toward that group mentality where people say, this is the place where I want to belong. This is the place I want. I don't want that type of relationship. I don't want that toxic relationship that occurs when people only ask me to do things so that it benefits them. And see, when that happens, there is no pure intention. Does it take a lot of work to have pure intentions? Well, it depends on how you're wired. I would think that if you're wired a little less authentically, then maybe it is going to take a little hard, but it's not that hard to do it. Is it hard to offer common courtesy to people, to be considerate? No, it's not hard to do that. Can we exhibit manners to individuals? Yes. So in the workplace, do I teach manners? No, because why? We bring it. Should you bring compassion? Yes. It's not all getting it all done first day in the training. You have been working on it all of your life. And if you haven't honed your skill, then now is a good time for you to think about honing your skill so that you will be ready. It's not that much of a big deal. It's only a big deal if you don't want to do it.
Mm. Did you by default already define culture in all of the talk about leadership at this point? Because we've talked
I,
about the group,
yeah,
but it's the other word in your title.
yeah.
So did you by default explain what culture then looks like or should look like or should be by
I'm going to,
explain by
in
talking about
essence,
what the leader is?
yeah, I think in essence it is, but I want to just give a little bit more. So the culture is further expanded with the core values of the company. And it's also what is the standard operating practices. So you have traditions and rituals and customs, and you have language and symbols. Those are all part of the culture. Your core values are very intimate to the expression of the organization because the core values explain what the organization would be look like if it were humanized. And it would say, I have an organization that I work with, and they believe that their core values and what they want people to subscribe to is community, to being open-minded, to being respectful, and excellence. And so they say that if this organization were a human, they would be thinking of other people through the community. They'd be open-minded, which they'd be teachable. They'd have respect for other people, meaning they know how to treat them and be a good social architect in that area. And they also have excellence, which means that they will focus on those shared mutual commitments and the things that need to happen. So in that value of core, which end up being community, open-mindedness, respectfulness, and excellence, I can say that the essence of belonging, value, and shared mutual commitment can interact in that area. That's why you infuse it into their core, which will then help ignite that culture where people live in, because that's that space where we are. And I have a fundamental philosophy about culture in a couple of ways, a couple of sound bites for you. And
Okay.
one of them is that culture is always built in how you treat people, not the treats you give them. And culture is available to everyone, whether they're under the same roof or not.
Hmm. Interesting. So if for those who are listening, and I always come to the point where, man, I would love to work for, and this is the general person out there on the street. I would love to work for a company that embodied this, that even in part, so even this, a part of this was real in my company. I would like going to work more often, or I would like to be there and give that. So what's the starting point of looking at this transformation? And you know, how does somebody who runs a company, big or small, really kind of get started in saying, this sounds good, I would like to embody this, I would like to implement it, I just don't know how?
Well,
Is that
first,
is that legitimate
no,
question?
it's very fair. So I think what it is the person has to say, this is what I want, and I'm willing to do what it takes. I will take the rigor that is needed. I'll take the determination. I'll take all of the dedication that needs to happen, and I'm going to make sure that I follow those things. And I'm going to then embody a team of people who will also subscribe to the same things. I will not bring people into my executive or senior leadership of the organization that does not subscribe to that. If I have an individual who really believes that people were put on this planet to serve me and to serve my needs, then that's not the person that is going to help us get the culture that I've just been talking about. So it really always starts at the executive level. There are three things that make this culture successful in an organization. The first thing is that whatever we do has to be the truth. Everything has to be around some valuable moral or ethical livings that's important for the group. And so you have to figure out what that is and what will be the moral standard or your ethical standard that you will have for that, and build your truth around it so that what you say is what you do and you can practice that. And then the next part of the success of the culture is that senior leadership will support it. They will believe it. You won't have individuals in a team meeting all agree to it and then they act like separate individuals when they go outside. Then they've also operated in a silo mentality, and they can create those politics and turf wars that Patrick Lencioni talks about in his book, uh, Politics, Silos, and Turf Wars. So you have to have that, because then you should be bringing on people into your organization who will subscribe to the core values. And will people be held to those values in the organization? So what are the training programs? What's the coaching programs that go behind that you'll be able to do it? And then the third element of it, so you have truthfulness, which is it speaks the truth. You have senior leadership support. And then it has to be so reasonable that people will live it, breathe it, and own it. And the way I describe individuals who operate in this way, I say it the same way that you have skin on your bones. Imagine that you should be embodying these things like your skin
Hmm.
that covers your bones and produces the person that you are. And that without it, you would look aghast. You would say, oh, I don't want to see those exposed bones.
Hmm.
So I want to wrap it in a skin that actually is supportive, a skin that actually makes sense, a skin that is pleasing for others to be with and to be a part of, and that I would be proud to wear. That's the essence of what I try to get leaders to do. I work with them to retain their talent by infusing cohesion into their culture, so they create safe workspaces where people have a sense of belonging, are valued, and they share in mutual commitment. And when that happens, you will get performance every single time, and you get a level of engagement from people that individuals then naturally are helpful. They are active, meaning that they're not sitting around waiting for someone else to give them something to do. They know their work, they have autonomy, they want to do their work. Those individuals are vested, meaning that they are committed to the outcomes of the organization. Just like we said, commit to others first and then self, they commit to the organization and then self. And it becomes reciprocal when the organization is doing it in turn through the acts of the defined leaders of the organization. And then lastly, they're eager. They want to learn, they want to grow, they want to develop. And the good news is 63% of the current population want to have growth, development, and advancement. Now, that was the
In the
number in
workplace.
2019. 71% is what it is today. So we
Okay.
have gone up 8 points in the last 2.5, 3 years since I've released that book. So individuals in an organization who want to grow, develop, and advance is now at 71%. So you already got the mindset for people to be eager to learn, grow, and develop. You now have to figure out how to harness that energy, how to harness those resources to make it happen. And I share that on page 103 in the book, which is the talent retention model. And it shows how the interactions of all those things are going to work together so that you can create that culture that infuses cohesion in it and get you the performance you're looking for.
So with that as it is, there are three things that I talked about that I wanted to talk about: cohesion, culture, and the paper airplanes. What are the paper airplanes all about? They're right here on the cover. Nobody puts paper airplanes on a cover
So there's
except
two,
you. So there has to be
yeah,
intent behind it.
there is. So there's two things about it. So the first thing is, if you think about what we're attempting to do is to get people to fly in the same direction, right? We're getting their perspective. We're aligning those individuals toward the culture. Every once in a while, you have one that veers off track, and the opportunity is for you to be able to bring them back on track
So
a
is
little
that what
bit.
we're looking at?
That's what you're looking at.
The white
And you
ones
see
are
the
all going in
arrows.
line, and this one is kind of
Yes.
off track a little
And
bit.
and you'll notice that also they're flying in a not in a defined formation, but in the fact that not everybody is at every level all the time.
Okay.
And so the transformation, notice that the one that went outside the line and then became a different color becomes the opportunity that has now more self-actualized into the culture where the others might be at varying stages of where they go. And that paper airplane just came from a story that I recalled that I thought was be helpful when I was talking about relating. You see, a lot of this work has to do with the relationship that people have with people. It isn't so much the relationship that people have with task. Task isn't going to get the work done, people do.
Right.
And my brother and I, when we were younger, we flew paper airplanes. And we were from a very, poor town, so we had very limited things to do and opportunity. And, you had to sometimes stay inside a lot. And so we would create this space in this hallway of our house, and we would stand at a place and we would fly the paper airplane to see how far the plane would actually go.
Mhm.
And the concept is that, my mom convinced me that I needed to help teach my brother how to fold the plane so that he could get a further distance out of it. And of course, at that age, I didn't want to be the transformative leader. I didn't want to create a culture where he beat me. I didn't want him to be more successful than I was. So, but my mom encouraged me to really make sure that I did that. And it really becomes the part of the relationship that in organizations, you have to not be afraid of someone flying their plane further than you do. Like that isn't something you should be afraid of. What you should be afraid of is that they never try to fly the plane at all. And that's the type of individual that may not be as helpful to have as a part of your core or part of your culture. You want people to try, and you want people to be helpful to teach others how to do it and to do it even better than yourself. You should never fear that someone else will be better than you, because what you should be working on is how much better will you be than the person you were the day before.
Sounds great. And it also sounds like your mother was full of wisdom. Um,
She was, which is why the other book, Fanny Rules, that we are not talking about today,
but it's
was
behind
important for
you.
me. It's behind me, but it's important to mention because it's about the leadership, and it's to really let people see who am I as a person and how did I get there, and and what that may look like. So there's 31 teachable moments wrapped around 9 rules for leaders. So it's a nice complement to the Cohesion Culture book, especially since leadership is such an important aspect of what we do to create culture and to sustain it.
Well, Dr. Troy Hall, I appreciate your time. I would love if you had the opportunity to give us um, a case study example, but I don't know if you've got the time or if we should just reserve that for maybe another conversation. I would love to just to see this in practice, because we could talk about concepts and ideas all day long, but to actually see it in practice, or at least hypothetically in practice, would be awesome. I don't know if you would be interested in doing that or not.
Well, the last section of the book, those last two chapters, chapters 5 and 6, talk about how you put it into action. So I wanted to make sure that the book had all the information that you needed, even though I might produce additional books and I want to, get them out there available to be in the marketplace and for people to buy them. I thought it was really important that you as a leader could pick up a document and say, this could be my roadmap. I know how I should gear myself as a leader. I know what I should be focusing on for the culture. And then here are some examples of bringing it to life. And probably the most important of those is mentorship. And I've just been reading some additional information, especially on today's remote workplace
Mm.
and the individual, the remote worker. And creating mentorship programs is one of the ways in which I recommend that companies retain talent, because they now create a greater connectivity between the individual who's working remote and the individual who's working somewhere else, whether they are remote or whether they're in, physically at the office. But you really want to create that mentorship where you're sharing information and ideas and the development. It's really kind of like it's a coaching, so to speak. And you don't want the mentorship just to be, hey, I'm going to assign 2 people, but you actually create the program for the mentor. So the mentor understands their role and responsibilities and creates structure so that the conversations between the mentee and the mentor are reasonable and they're able to do it. So there are a lot of companies, real life examples that offer mentor programs. In the book, I talk about the program that I created in conjunction with Will Crosswell for the Carolinas Credit Union League. I
Okay.
also worked with Constantine Camaras from the Philippines, and we created a global leadership program, leadership exchange program that received a statewide recognition in South Carolina for establishing a global program for the first in the state to do so, to actually bring individuals from another country here and mentor with them in this culture, and also then exchange and go to their culture to learn about their culture as well. So those are some real practical things that are for real. And then in addition, I've got some local universities that I participate in some mentoring programs. And in addition to my own executive coaching, I do some pro bono work for people. So I don't know, dude, if you wanted some real live stuff, here it is.
Well, maybe we could come back again, like I said, and you could bring whoever on board, and we could kind of talk about its its application and how it's been working. But until then, how can people get in touch with you? Are you just on LinkedIn, or is there anything, YouTube, or
It's
you have your own website?
Yeah, it's really good. Thank you for asking. So most social media, such as Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, it's at Dr. Troy Hall. And on the
Okay.
website, it's drtroyhall.com. So it's just those 10 little letters, either preceded with an at symbol or ending with a .com. And if you really want to connect with me to really have a meaningful conversation, when you go to the website, which is drtroyhall.com, on the top right is the word schedule. Touch the word schedule, you can actually schedule time with me, and I'll be happy to interact with you.
Cool. Thank you so much, sir. It's been a pleasure to have you and have this conversation. Take
Well, thank
care.
you. It's really great. And by the way, I think you asked me a question in the very beginning, but you never let me answer it. You asked me how I was. And I want to say to you that I am great. And if I were any better, I bet I'd be you.
And with that, we're done.